Hey, my friend, in today's episode, we're going to talk all about medicinal mushrooms. Yes, you heard that right. We'll talk about what they are, what are the benefits, and how you should be trying them. In addition, you'll learn how they can help improve your cognition, and they may also give you a long life. So stay tuned. Hello. Today, my guest is a mycologist who has been in the mushroom space for years and one of the top experts on how to grow mushrooms at home. He wrote the book, The Mushroom Cultivator, in the 80s. I'm excited to talk to him about medicinal mushrooms, which are not the mushrooms you find in the grocery store, but the ones that are being used in medicine or have been used in medicine in the Far East for a long time. He runs a company called Nemex, which is the first certified organic mushroom company in the world. Jeff, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hack Show.
Hey, Faraz, thank you very much for having me here. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So you've been doing mushrooms for a very long time. Let's dive into your background and understand how you got into mushrooms to begin with.
Well, I was raised in Seattle, Pacific Northwest. It's perfect climate for mushrooms. In fact, probably some of the best wild mushroom growing in the world. Rains all the time, mushrooms grow in the fall, and that's when the temperature goes down. It's a moderate kind of maritime climate, but lots of rain. I mean, we just have water everywhere. That's why people from California, when they get thirsty, they just come up to Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, when I was younger, I went out mushroom hunting. Really enjoyed it. It's really fun. You go out, you walk through the forest, and then when you find things, you essentially it's like a treasure hunt. You find treasure, so it's really cool. And then when I went to university, I decided that I wanted to carry on and study about mushrooms. My major was actually anthropology, and I put the two together: anthropology, mycology, and my study was really about the use of mushrooms worldwide for food, for medicine, and in shamanic purposes. So after university, of course, what do you do with a degree in anthropology? I
Right.
I asked my mycology professor, I'm really interested in growing mushrooms, I said, and he said, well, there's a big mushroom farm 60 miles from Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
only one in the state, actually. I went down there, I applied for a job, I got a job. And Faraz, listen, for the next 10 years, I literally lived with mushrooms.
Wow, that seems fascinating for a kid growing up, just getting out of college, not really knowing what to do, but kind of picking a path. That was pretty cool. I'm sure at that point in time, this was in the 80s, right? Or
This was
70s?
in the early 70s. So I started at this mushroom farm, large mushroom farm. I mean, 200 employees growing 2 million pounds of the button mushroom per year. That was 1973.
Wow. Americans were eating button mushrooms in 1973 in that much quantity?
Oh, well, 2 million pounds in the mushroom industry is nothing. I mean, the mushroom industry, the agaricus industry in the United States is huge. So that was really kind of a drop in the bucket, less than 1% of what would be produced in the country at the time. But it was a big farm. And, I loved every minute of it. I mean, literally, we would have 4 new houses because everything's grown indoors. Have you ever seen a mushroom farm?
I have not.
Yeah, very few people have because they're grown indoors in like big warehouses or traditionally in sort of big barns. And so you can drive right by them and you wouldn't even know that they're there. So every single week we had 4 new crops that were going into these rooms, and we had 4 old crops that were being taken out. So that's every week. So think about that. 4 times 50 weeks or so, that's 200 crops a year. Each crop would produce about 20,000 pounds. I was seeing 200 crops a year in the 10 years. I saw 2,000 individual crops of mushrooms. Now think about a normal farmer. What does he see? Like 50 crops in a lifetime? So
Mhm.
it was really fascinating. I enjoyed my time there. And while I was there, we had a Japanese scientist who worked for the company, and he was growing shiitake, oyster mushroom, and enoki-take. So I also got to be involved with growing other species of mushrooms, which had been grown in Asia for a long, long time, but were not being grown in the United States at that time. So it was really pretty incredible all in all. So it was interesting 10 years. And like I say, I was literally living with millions of mushrooms for those 10 years. And here's an interesting fact about mushroom growing. Every single mushroom that you see in the supermarket has been picked by hand.
Is that right?
There is no mechanical harvesters for mushrooms out there. So every single mushroom that you might be, putting into your bag or whatever, it has been picked by a human.
My goodness.
Yeah. So it's not like, it can be machine harvested. You're shaking a tree and all the nuts fall, or it goes through and chops down the wheat or whatever it is. No, it's all harvested by hand.
Wow, that's great to know. Now, Jeff, so what led you from being on a farm for 10 years and watching these crops grow and kind of becoming the expert while you were there into creating your own company?
Well, part of my studies in university and then continuing while the time I was at the mushroom farm was reading all about mushrooms used as medicines, especially in Asia. They've been used in traditional Chinese medicine for maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years, and probably even before then. And one of the ones that you keep coming across when I'm reading is a mushroom called reishi. Reishi mushroom. Have you ever seen a reishi mushroom?
I have not. I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's beautiful. It's red. It's got a shape on it, kind of like a ram's horn. It's just a beautiful spiral shape. And it's considered to be, they call it the mushroom of immortality in China. Think about that for a minute. The mushroom of immortality, really? Well, because the benefits were longevity. So I was reading about all of this, and when I finally left the mushroom farm in 1983, throughout the 80s, I was working, I had my own laboratory for making mushroom spawn, which is the seed to grow mushrooms. And then in 1989, after reading all about medicinal mushrooms, I decided that is going to be the business that I'm interested in starting. So I started my current business, Namix, selling medicinal mushroom products to the natural products industry, basically all those companies that have herbal products that they're selling in 1989.
That's great. That's great. Now, I want to talk to you about the use of mushrooms in ancient Chinese medicine as well as the Far East. And we know the people there have been using mushrooms for a long time. Were they being used as food, or were they being used as medicine?
Well, both. And that's such an interesting question, because I consider mushrooms to be a fantastic food. And it's what I consider to be the forgotten food, and maybe the missing link in the Western diet. I mean, in Asia, in Europe, they've been eating mushrooms for centuries. And I look at mushrooms as food as medicine. I mean, when we're talking about food, we want something that nourishes us. But what if you had a food that not only nourishes us, which is keeps us healthy, but also had other benefits that actually could, in this case, activate our immune systems if need be? I mean, so mushrooms in that sense to me are kind of a perfect food. And I'm always telling people, before you even supplement with mushrooms, put them into your diet. And for us, today, we have more mushrooms in the marketplace than we ever had. In Los Angeles, you can go out to the right market and you can get probably 6, 7 different species. You can definitely get shiitake. You could get maitake, probably lion's mane, oyster mushroom. I mean, today you can actually get these mushrooms fresh, put them into your diet, get the dietary benefits of them, as well as the medicinal benefits. So there's actually medicinal mushrooms, fresh medicinal mushrooms that you can buy and put into your diet.
Yeah, that's cool. I go to the Whole Foods out in LA and I see a lot of mushrooms. You know, traditionally, I have not been a huge proponent of mushrooms because I didn't understand the medicinal benefits or the food as medicine benefits in the past. And lately, I've been reading up on some of the scientific literature, which is really pointing to a really helpful use of mushrooms in the diet, as you said, has been forgotten or was never part of a diet in recent memory, and therefore reintroducing them or introducing them into our diet. It makes a lot of sense to me. So I will be looking as I go further. I'll be looking to incorporate the shiitake, the maitakes, the oyster mushrooms into my diet. Now, you know, Jeff, going out into the wilderness, I've done my fair share of hiking in hot, humid, or colder environments, and I've definitely seen mushrooms growing on trees. I've seen them growing on the ground. What percentage of mushrooms out there in the wild, we know there's a lot of them, are poisonous, and which ones are actually helpful? How does a layperson that's out on a walk tell that they shouldn't touch one or they shouldn't eat one versus this is a good kind?
Well, first of all, remember that there are lots of poisonous plants out there, as well as poisonous animals that we don't want to eat, right? So it's really no different with mushrooms. There are mushrooms that can, in fact, kill you, and other mushrooms that are very good edibles, and other mushrooms that you could eat but just taste bad. So you're not going to want to eat those. But look, the key thing when you're out there, if you don't know anything about mushrooms, do not pick mushrooms and take them back and go, this looks so tasty and looks like what's in the marketplace. I'm just going to fry it up and eat it. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
But, you know, in Los Angeles, they have the Los Angeles Mycological Society. And this is just a group of people that are mushroom lovers, and they will go out foraging in a regular way when the season is right down there, and they love to take people out with them. And the other cool thing about these mycological societies, because they have them in most larger communities in the United States, is every year they'll normally have a presentation or a one day where you can come and they will have been out picking mushrooms. They'll bring them in, they'll put them out on tables, sometimes in really nice displays. They'll label them. You can bring mushrooms in, they'll tell you what they are. Great way to learn about mushrooms and get introduced to it. And certainly going out with these mushroom groups, you can, you know, and the key thing is you go out with them, you learn maybe one major mushroom species when you go out with them. And then, you know, when you go out mushroom hunting, you find that one species, you're fairly certain about it, you take it back, you know, and then if you want to continue on, you just kind of learn one species at a time until maybe after a few years, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 different mushroom species that you can recognize and feel safe with, and go out and harvest them. But here's the thing that everybody needs to remember about any new food, whether it be a mushroom or whatever it is, you know, you really should start slow, try it out, eat a little bit of it, see if it agrees with you. I know people that are dyed-in-the-wool mushroom hunters, and there are certain species that they can't eat just because it upsets their stomach. So that's something you always have to remember. And I just say with any food, no matter what it is, don't sit down and eat a huge plate of it, and then later on you're like, oh, what did I do, right? And this is one of the key issues with mushroom poisoning, because, and interestingly enough, a lot of times the poisonings are from immigrant groups. They come into the United States, they've been living here a while, they go out, you know, mushroom hunting, and they go, oh, gee, that looks exactly like we used to pick back home. My parents picked it, we ate it. They collect these mushrooms, they bring them back, they cook them up, and they eat a lot of them. And the thing with some of the toxins in these mushrooms is You do not know you've been poisoned until 8 hours later. And at that point, if you've eaten a large amount, it's over. There's nothing they can do for you. I mean, it attacks these toxins will attack your vital organs. So everybody go out with the mushroom club, learn about the wild mushrooms, and it's wonderful. You're out, you're in really interesting, cool areas, and learning about these mushrooms while being in a great environment and getting fresh air and part of nature. It's great.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'll definitely take a look at the LA Mycological Society and see if I can go attend a meeting or even go on a field trip with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Because they always bring speakers in too to do presentations, and yeah, they love new members or even just visitors. They love that.
Awesome. Now, Jeff, I want to ask you a different question. There's a lot of research that's being done on mushrooms, more so lately than in the past. Seems like. How does one keep up with the vast amounts of research being done, and what do you do? Are you reading papers all the time?
Oh my God. Yeah, it is hard. It is really hard. Sometimes what I do is we have people that on our team, and I'll just say, could you please go out, find whatever research, write me a report on it. Because I mean, my files are so chock full of research paper. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands. And keeping up on it is so difficult, so very difficult. But it's all really, really interesting. And like you say, the research is coming out just because mushrooms are all of a sudden being sort of discovered in the West, let's say, but there's a tremendous amount of research that's ongoing in Japan and China, and so there's always interesting stuff. But you know what? One of the things that let me just talk about for a second, just so that everybody is totally familiar as we go forward, and that's just what is a mushroom. It's like, listen, how do you grow a mushroom? They don't have seeds. So what are you supposed to do? How do you plant? How do you grow these things? Well, mushrooms have spores. In nature, these spores are produced. They go out on air currents. They land on the ground. They land on wood. They're everywhere. And when conditions are right, those spores can germinate, and they'll germinate into a very, very fine filament. And when multiple spores germinate and those filaments come together and fuse, they'll create a network of these filaments, and that network is called mycelium. Mycelium is what we consider the body of this fungus, and what it does is it is one of the premier recyclers in nature. So think of all of the leaves, all of the woody tissue, all of those plants that are annual plants that come up, they flower, and then they die. You've got all of this organic matter that has to be repurposed. So that's what fungi do, is they're out there with this mycelium, breaking it all down. I mean, they're being helped by bacteria, they're being helped by bugs, you name it. Everything is out there feeding on it, breaking it down until ultimately all that organic matter is humus that feeds the plants and the trees and everything else out there. So we've got the spore, we've got this mycelium network, and normally you don't see it because it's underground or it's embedded in the piece of wood. But when conditions are right, like in the fall up here in the Northwest, temperature goes down, it rains, which means the humidity goes up. Mushrooms need a high humidity environment to grow. Up comes a mushroom, and people are like, wow, where did that come from? It wasn't there yesterday. Well, it was there yesterday, but you didn't see it because it starts out small and then it grows up, and when it gets to a certain size, you go, oh my God, look at that, a mushroom. So the mushroom begins to form on that mycelium network that's under the ground. It takes maybe 2 weeks to start from a very small little pinhead to going through the stages of maturity until we ultimately have a mushroom, a stem, a cap. Underneath are the gills. That's where the spores are produced. Now we have a completion of this life cycle. So we've got spore, we've got mycelium, and we've got mushroom. Now what we eat is the mushroom. What has been used medicinally is the mushroom. And interestingly enough, if I want to produce mushrooms, the seed that I use to produce mushrooms is actually live mycelium. We can grow that mycelium in a laboratory, put it on a carrier material, and then once it's covered this carrier material, like let's just say grain, you can break that all up, you can mix it into whatever you want to grow your mushrooms on, and that's the seed for growing mushrooms. So that's basically our organism. And in herbal medicine or in supplements, you're always going, okay, now is this the root, or is it the flower, or is it the leaf? Every herb, certain what we call plant parts will be where the medicine is, where those compounds are. So it's really important when you're buying a supplement, for example, am I getting the right thing in here? Are they giving me, if you're looking for ginseng, you want the root, you don't want the leaves. So this is something when you're buying a mushroom product, you want to be sure that you're actually getting a mushroom, not the mycelium or the spores or anything like that. You want to be sure you're getting the proper plant part here. So that's really important for people to understand.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, thank you for that. I want to come back to that specifically because there's a lot of mycelium products on the market, and I want to ask you a question of how we can differentiate and customers can get the right thing. Before we do that, though, I want to ask you about some of the active compounds in mushrooms and why they're beneficial. So let's go down the list and talk about each active compound and why it's beneficial for humans to consume. So the first one is beta-glucans. Can you talk about that?
Sure. The beta-glucan is a polysaccharide, and it's a very specific type of polysaccharide. Polysaccharides are out there. They're in a lot of different plants. And for example, starch is a polysaccharide. But these beta-glucans, which are a polysaccharide, make up close to 50% of the cell wall of mushrooms. And it's a very specific beta-glucan, and the difference is the way it's branched. It's called a 1,3,1,6 beta-glucan, and that's specific to fungi and yeasts. And that's very important because some beta-glucans are a 1,3,1,4, and that beta-glucan would be nothing but the starches and plant-based beta-glucans. Like you can get beta-glucans out of oats, for example, but they don't have the same medicinal properties that the fungal beta-glucans have, and that's why the structure of the beta-glucan is so important. What scientists have found, and there is a ton of papers that have been written on the beta-glucans, and that is they will potentiate our immune system. And the way to look at that is potentiation is basically strengthening. Who doesn't want strengthened immunity, right? Especially in these times, and like right now with the virus issues we've got out there. I mean, we've had trouble just keeping our products in stock. So what happens is these beta-glucans, they, when you consume the mushroom, we actually have receptor sites in our lower intestines, and those beta-glucans go down there. They hit those receptor sites, and then those receptors will basically then stimulate the production of immune cells, whether that be macrophages, helper T cells. So that's really the role that the beta-glucans will play, and so that's why oftentimes when people need, they're tired, they're energyless, they actually are having trouble, they get colds all the times, or that's where we need a little bit of help. And that's where mushrooms come in. That's the role they play. And they will sort of sit in the background. That's one of the things about a mushroom product, for example, is don't expect to be taking it and it's like you just taking an IBU and your pain's gone away in a couple hours or something like that. Mushrooms, no. You need to take them for a while. They're sitting in the background. They're just basically they're helping you when you need it. So the beta-glucan is the primary medicinal compound in mushrooms. And what scientists have found is that because all mushrooms contain beta-glucan, so you can even get these when you're eating them, but certain mushrooms, that 1,3,1,6 beta-glucan structure, even that structure can change a little bit, and that's the difference between a mushroom being highly medicinal or just kind of like a good edible. So that's why we have reishi or turkey tail or maitake, shiitake, those being well researched as giving us really strong immune response.
Okay, great. What about the triterpenoids that are found in mushrooms? What are the benefits of these compounds?
Well, triterpenoids are found in like reishi mushroom, chaga. Not all mushrooms will have these types of triterpenoids, and that kind of what's interesting about the triterpenoids is that makes these mushrooms distinctive compared to some of the others. So for example, reishi, you're not going to eat a reishi mushroom because it's like a piece of wood. Have you ever seen chaga?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that the gnarliest thing you've ever seen?
It is. It just looks like charcoal. Yeah.
I know. And chaga is not a true mushroom. It's actually a fungal produced growth on a birch tree that is produced by the tree trying to ward off the invasion by this fungus. And once it gets in there, the mycelium is inside that tree and it is growing in there and it is challenging this tree, and ultimately it will kill the tree. But in the meantime, the tree will react by creating this chaga, which is also considered a canker disease. So those two mushrooms specifically have triterpenoids, and the triterpenoids are used for, well, in chaga's case, it's antiviral. They've got some great evidence for that. It's also considered to be antioxidant. With the reishi, the triterpenoids are used for the liver, helping with liver function, blood purification. I met a traditional Chinese medicine doctor at a reishi conference in the 90s in Beijing, and he told me that reishi was his number one herb for the liver. And I thought, wow, that is really fascinating to me that would be his top herb for the liver. I mean, the liver is super important in terms of our health, in terms of the fact of how it is actually helping us get rid of toxins and so forth. So that was really fascinating. So that's where the triterpenoids come in.
Great. Okay, so I want to go, quickly rapid fire on a few of the mushrooms, and I want to ask you specific questions on each type of mushroom. So let's start with reishi. What is a reishi mushroom?
Well, a reishi mushroom is something that grows on wood. It's what we call a polypore. So when it grows up on that piece of wood, it is very woody itself. Traditionally, it's used as a tea, as are a lot of Chinese medicines. Reishi is used for definitely for the immunological properties. It's one of the highest actually in beta-glucans, and reishi also has the triterpene, so it's great for your immunity, and it's also really good for the liver cleansing properties. And again, it's called the mushroom of immortality because it's also considered to be a longevity herb. And in China, they have, a dozen or two of these herbs that they really highly prize and consider to be very important for longevity and long life. And while I'm thinking about that, there have been studies done for us where they will look at very large populations, give them tests, who eats mushrooms, who doesn't. And one of the things that they found in some of these studies is that the part of the population that eats mushrooms regularly seems to live longer than the people that don't.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Predict
And
mortality.
I'm definitely interested in not the immortality, but at least the longevity aspect of the reishi mushroom, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, immortality. Come on. We are immortal in a sense in this moment.
Yes. Okay. How much dose should one be taking, Jeff, of the reishi mushroom? And is it a daily thing you do?
Well, here's what I recommend to people in terms of supplementation. And this came by a paper written by a doctor, MD, who grew up in Hong Kong, studied some traditional Chinese medicine, but then emigrated to the West, went to medical school. He's now a practicing doctor and been that way for the last 30 years in New York City. He looked at all the research and he said, and this was for reishi, he's basically said, what they have been using traditionally is 2 to 5 dried grams of the actual mushroom. Or the equivalent amount of extract. So, you could say, well, 5 grams of mushroom powder, that seems like a lot. So maybe if it's a 10-to-1 extract, what that means, 500 milligrams. So that's why we, like with reishi, we produce extracts of that. Besides the fact that it's not really highly digestible. So I use that for almost every mushroom, 2 to 5 dried grams. And here's what's interesting about that is that there's a mushroom that we will talk about called lion's mane, and they've actually done clinical trials with lion's mane and these are with control groups, and they've given one group 3 dried grams of lion's mane. The control group, of course, gets nothing. After taking this for 120 days, and before they start, they give them a battery of tests. After 120 days, they test them again. The group taking the lion's mane did better on the same group of tests as the control group. And what was interesting was they stopped taking it at that point. They tested them again 30 days later. The group that had taken the lion's mane had done so well after 30 days of not taking it, dropped back down to about the same as the control group. Really interesting. Only 3 dried grams of the actual mushroom powder. Now, look, that 3 dried grams, that's 30 grams. Mushrooms are 90% water. That's 30 grams of fresh mushrooms. That's probably 2 fresh lion's mane mushrooms that a person could be putting into their diet. So when you think about that, and then, when you're going to supplement use, okay, so you go, okay, well, I want to at least get the minimum. I want 2 grams if it's not really highly concentrated, and maybe more. Or if it's a concentrated product, I'll look to make sure that it's got, let's just say, 200 milligrams of the extract in there, or maybe more. So 2 to 5 grams of dried mushroom or extract equivalent is kind of what I say in terms of getting a medicinal benefit. That's about what you'd want to take.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now let's talk about the next one that you kind of dove into a little bit, is the lion's mane. There's news and reports that it's very good for cognition and memory, and it improves NGF, which is the nerve growth factor. So that seems like a great mushroom to take as well. I mean, reishi, obviously, mushroom of immortality, but lion's mane seem to have different benefits for the brain, which is super cool.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's not the only one. There's actually other mushrooms that have that same benefit, but lion's mane has kind of, because of some of the clinical trials, it has kind of popped up to the top, and people sort of know lion's mane because of that. So nerve growth factor is something that helps us to organize and maintain our neurons. And as we get older, we don't produce as much of it. So anything that can help promote the production of nerve growth factor, and therefore help to keep our neurons functioning a little bit better, is definitely a good thing. So that's where lion's mane comes in. And what's really interesting is that 5 years ago we sold next to no lion's mane.
Yeah.
because they're, and you're familiar with the whole term nootropic.
Yes.
Well, where did that come from, right? Well, that's been out there slowly percolating for a while, and now it's kind of like, a lot of people, nootropics, and they're really into nootropics. And nootropic, the way I define it, is something that enhances our performance in some way. Like my nootropic of choice is coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the human race, coffee is now the base level of nootropic, right? There's like nootropic stacks that people are putting on. So they take 4 plus coffee on one day and then 5 others and then some smart drugs on the other day. And it's a very fascinating science for sure. So far we've covered 2. One, reishi, which helps with immunity, which is very good as a longevity enhancer. And then we're talking about lion's mane, which improves your nerve growth factor, which improves your focus, concentration, memory, myelin, which can improve the longevity of your brain. So 2 for 2 so far, Jeff. The third one, let's get into, is the cordyceps.
Well, cordyceps is really interesting because traditionally cordyceps has been wildcrafted up in Tibet. And actually what happens is that the wildcrafted cordyceps actually will grow on a caterpillar. This poor caterpillar goes to hibernate as the winter's approaching. It hibernates, it digs down into the ground a couple inches down, and then it's planning to wake up in the summer when temperatures come back up, but it never does, because cordyceps has actually, the spores have germinated on this caterpillar. The mycelium will start to grow. It consumes the entire inside of the caterpillar. And then the summer comes, and instead of the caterpillar turning into a moth, we get a little cordyceps that grows off of it. So people are on their hands and knees in Tibet, out in the pastures, looking for this thing. And when they find this little tiny blade of grass, it's maybe 3 inches tall. That's what it kind of looks like. It's kind of a grass, like they actually call it winter worm summer grass. That's the name they've given to cordyceps. They will dig back, they will pull out the caterpillar with this cordyceps, dry it, and that is the traditional cordyceps product out there. Today it's worth $20,000 a dried kilogram.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
$20,000
a dried kilo. Yeah. I actually, believe it or not, I tried to introduce cordyceps to the supplement market back in the early 90s, and everybody that looked at it just went, my customers are not going to eat caterpillars. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So it never really went anywhere. But recently, they have learned how to grow cordyceps, and now we are growing a species that the other species is called Ophiocordyceps sinensis. The species that we grow now is called Cordyceps militaris. They've been used interchangeably. We can grow that Cordyceps militaris. It's a beautiful orange-shaped fungus. We don't grow it on insects, so nobody has to worry about that. No insects are harmed in growing it, but it's pure 100% cordyceps. It's no insect or anything. So, and what cordyceps has been used for is people coming out of an illness. They just can't seem to get over the hump. They're tired. They're energyless, fatigued. That's when they would prescribe cordyceps to these people. Also for lung disease and some kidney issues, but neurasthenia, which is this being tired coming out of a illness, is primarily where they would use cordyceps. Now in North America, what, you talk about fatigue or something like that, and all of a sudden people go, oh, athletic performance. Mm-hmm. It seems like where a lot of companies go with cordyceps is they they utilize it for some type of athletic product.
Whether that's proven to work or not, it's up in the air, I think, at this point. But if you can market it to a certain subproduct, people get very excited.
That's absolutely right. And the thing about it is it's kind of hard to quantify. I mean, sometimes like they can do tests, and I know they have done certain tests in the U.S. actual clinical trials with athletes. What they found, at least in the few studies that they've done, was that if you're a high-level athlete already, it didn't show any benefit, but it did seem to provide some benefits that people weren't of that same caliber. The other way, the other way that they measure something for fatigue is they do what they call the mouse swimming test. So they've got
I've heard of that. Yeah.
They put the mouse in, the control swims around. After so long, it drops, and they pull it out, and everything's good. Then they feed the mouse cordyceps for a while, a different mouse. They put it in, and it swims, and they see how much longer than the one that didn't have the cordyceps. And that's how they gauge whether something would have some benefit for fatigue or tiredness.
Got it. Yeah, that seems like a cool test, though it's almost also seems like waterboarding for mice, unfortunately. But I have a different question now. Cordyceps, I heard, Jeff, this is hearsay, is that it can also improve your libido and can act as an aphrodisiac. Is that true, or is that just fairy tales?
Well, you know what? That's what some of the claims for it. I don't tend to focus on that because for a couple of reasons. One, there's also out there what's called the doctrine of signatures. Are you familiar with the doctrine of signatures? Doctrine of signatures says if something looks like something, it's probably good. For example, if something looks like a kidney, like a reishi mushroom looks like a kidney, reishi mushroom, let's use that to treat a kidney disease. So that's like produces like, that kind of idea. Cordyceps is I mean, mushrooms are kind of phallic-like as it is, but cordyceps is this little blade-like thing. And so I think that might be part of it. And, for me, I'm just like, look, cordyceps is very expensive. You can go out there and you can buy Viagra or Cialis. It works. You don't have to be taking cordyceps.
Okay, got it. The other interesting thing you pointed out about cordyceps is that, like the caterpillar, I read that if it takes over an ant, then the ant makes its way to the top of the tree and then just hangs out there till it explodes, and all these spores out of the ant can scatter into the wind, and they can go as far as wide to spread the seeds, so to speak, and therefore they have a chance of, promulgating the species, if you will, which seems like so scary. That is going to take over the organism and cause it to explode, at whatever feet or height.
Yeah, I know that kind of. I've seen that and read about that, and it's kind of like the zombie ants taken over by cordyceps. It's actually a bunch of baloney, but
okay.
and here's why. Yeah, yes, in fact, the ant does get affected by cordyceps, and they say, it takes over, and it's instructing the ant to go up the whatever. No. It doesn't. They've actually done other studies that show it has nothing to do with the ant's actual cognitive functions, or it just basically the ant is just carrying on with this infection. It ends up stopping somewhere. And look, these particular cordyceps species, they feed on insects. So if an insect gets infected with it, whether it's an ant or whatever type of bug, the caterpillar that produces the cordyceps, that's just the fungus that does in fact infect and feed on those particular organisms. Not too different from a lot of nature and how it all works. I mean, you could say just about the same thing with any mushroom growing off whatever it is, and it's just consume that, and look at it, exploded with spores, right? Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting story, but there's not any real truth to it, and people are just kind of throwing out their own speculations on it, which so often is the case. When we look at natural phenomena, we kind of throw a human mesh over it. Oh, look at that. It's kind of acting just like we would act. Well, yeah, isn't that interesting how that works? It's in a sense, it's anthropomorphizing.
Which goes back to your degree right there, Jeff.
It does
Um,
indeed. That's where it
yeah,
comes in handy.
there we go. So we're running out of time, but I have so many more questions for you. So I'm going to ask them quickly. Let's go into the next mushroom, which is chaga. What is it, and why is it beneficial?
Well, chaga, actually, again, it's a canker, grows off of birch trees. It's widespread in the northern climates because the birch trees are vast. Lots of it out there. It grows off this birch. It gets harvested off of there. It's been used in Russia, Eastern Europe for primarily stomach issues. It also, there's also reports, traditional reports of it as a folk medicine for cancer. I don't look at that kind of thing so much, but I think with the chaga, there's also reports that say it's the number one antioxidant out there. And they only say that according to what's called an ORAC test, ORAC. And the ORAC test has already been shown to be very unreliable and doesn't really tell you anything real. So yeah, most mushrooms are high in antioxidants. Chaga, I would say, is really great if somebody's got some stomach issues, whether it be irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. I would say try chaga. See of that, because that's really traditionally where it seemed to be utilized a lot. And again, chaga is just a black gnarly thing. Scientists have actually done some examination of the chaga, and what they found is that there's only about 10 to 15% of actual fungal matter in the chaga. Chaga is mostly this black layer of melanin and then an inner part that is like broken down woody type tissue from the mycelium, but it's not what you'd call a true fungal product, but it is produced by the tree being attacked by a fungus called Inonotus.
Okay, Jeff, question for you. We've talked about 4 mushrooms so far. If you had to recommend just one mushroom to the audience, which one would that be?
Absolutely, it would be reishi. And the reason I say that is reishi is one of the highest in beta-glucans. So you're getting the beta-glucan from it. You're also getting the triterpenoids. So it's got sort of a dual purpose, dual action of it. It's highly revered in China. It's probably the most popular medicinal mushroom worldwide, and I think for very good reason. And the other one that I would mention that I think is really great is shiitake. And the beauty of shiitake is you can actually buy it in your stores and put it into your diet. So put shiitake into your diet and treat it as a medicinal food. And in Chinese, shiitake is called shangu. Shangu means fragrant mushroom. Oh man, have you ever eaten shiitake, Faraz?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. It's my favorite mushroom. It's got a fabulous aroma. It's really, really tasty. The thing about cooking with mushrooms is they go with just about anything. I mean, I'm a meat eater. I'm always putting mushrooms on any meat that I eat. You can put mushrooms into stir fries, into eggs. They will go with everything and just enhance meals with their flavors. And also you're getting this great medicinal benefit from them.
Okay, great. So reishi and add shiitake to your meals as you can. Cool.
Absolutely.
Jeff, you had mentioned that these mushrooms don't act right away. It takes a little bit of time because they're all natural compounds. How much time, weeks, should somebody take these for and start to see their benefits?
I would say probably 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, and that would be every day.
Yeah, daily. Yeah, and everybody's going to be different. What I would look for is mushrooms do have these antiviral properties. I would look for, are you continuing to get a lot of colds or flus or things like that? I mean, let's face it, for us, health is such a combination of factors, lifestyle factors, dietary factors, where you live, the air you breathe, the water you breathe. There's so many different things involved. But I personally think diet is the key. And then after you've got a really solid, very high quality diet, then after that, look to supplementation if you're still having certain issues. That's a good way to do it. But don't supplement with mushrooms until I personally think, unless until you put them into your diet. And for people who just don't want to eat mushrooms, that's fine. Go ahead and try supplementing with mushrooms. But because again, like I say, I really think they're kind of a forgotten food. And think about this: in the West, we've only had mushrooms in the supplement market since the late 90s. I mean, when I started my business in 1989, no company in North America had a mushroom supplement. My whole thing back then through the 90s was trying to educate companies about mushrooms, about their benefits, about the traditional use of them for thousands of years, and say, look, you've got a whole line of herbal products, but you don't have any mushrooms in there. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like? It's like, nobody's asking me for them. Why should I put out a product? It's not going to sell if nobody's asking me for it. So it took a while, and it's really kind of interesting, as somebody who's been studying mushrooms since the 60s and in the commercial business since 1973, and all of a sudden mushrooms are the latest big thing, and finally coming into their own, and people are like, oh, they just came out of nowhere. No, they've been slowly working their way into your consciousness, into the food markets and into the supplement market. And finally now they've kind of reached a certain escape velocity, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And kudos to you for spreading the word, and hopefully you're positioned well for this to take off personally and with your company. Now,
Thanks.
Jeff, there's a lot of supplement makers out there that are now selling mushroom supplements and with all kinds of claims. How does a consumer go find the right supplement, go find the right purity that they need, find the actual dosage that's going to make a difference, a noticeable difference, as opposed to a puff in the wind that they don't even feel after even a month of taking something?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I try to educate people about is the fact that there's a lot of products in the market that are made with mycelium. And these are simply U.S. companies. So if it says made in the USA, probably that's what you're buying. And what they do is they will sterilize grain in an autoclave in a lab. They'll inoculate it with mycelium. The mycelium grows out all over this grain. And once it's grown out, and that's maybe a 30, 45-day process, they will then dry it out, grind it to a powder, grain and all. So these products end up being mostly starch from all the grain. And the reason that we know this is because we have tests for beta-glucan and for alpha-glucan, which are the starches. And this is something that I've written about extensively. I've got a white paper that I put out in 2015, which basically unmasks these products, because what's been happening is that companies have been selling this product and calling it mushroom. Are you familiar with the product called tempeh?
Yes.
Well, that's what this is. Do you know how tempeh is made at all?
I do not know.
Well, tempeh is actually cooked soybeans with a fungus growing on it. So when you're eating tempeh, you're actually eating fungal mycelium. It's a great food product. But can you imagine if that tempeh was just dried out, ground to a powder, put into capsules, and called a mushroom? That's essentially what's going on out there. So if you're looking at all of them, there's so many mushroom products on the market now. Look in the supplements facts. If it says mycelium, that's what you're getting. You're getting myceliated grain. You're getting tempeh. And if you look in the other ingredients, it'll often tell you that there's grain in that product. And the front panel will say mushroom. It's not a mushroom. It's a novel product. It's actually a food product called tempeh. It's a very expensive supplement because you're not getting the benefits you want. It's very low in beta-glucans, sometimes next to no beta-glucans, and very high in starch. So it's very expensive starch. please look very carefully at the labels.
Okay, well, great to know. Thank you for that, Jeff. So look for something that has no grain, very low starch, high in beta-glucans, um, at a minimum to get the right bang for the buck from your supplement company or of your choice.
Yeah, and remember,
Now,
they won't tell you that there's starch in there. If you're lucky, they might say that the grains are in there. But a lot of companies will sell that product. They won't even say that it's mycelium. They won't even say that there's grain in there. They just say on the front panel it's mushroom. So you have to be very careful. If it says made in the USA, walk away.
okay, no, made in the USA. Okay, Jeff. Now I know you're a distributor. Do so I assume you supply a lot of the supplement companies with the mushroom products, with the extracts, with the supplements. Do you sell them direct to consumer as well?
We do, yeah. Namex, my business, is a raw material supplier to other companies, but we actually have a retail site. It's called Real Mushrooms. So if you want to try our products, you can certainly go to realmushrooms.com, and that's where you can get. What happens with a lot of companies that we sell to too is they might formulate, they might blend, they might put different things in. That's kind of one of the reasons why we started the retail side, was just because, okay, look, here you can get 100% mushroom extracts without anything else in there. And so, yeah, Real Mushrooms, that's where you can get the products at the retail level.
Okay,
all pretty much online. We're not out in any of the stores or anything. It's just an online, that's where we sell them.
Okay, so realmushrooms.com if people are looking for mushrooms direct from your company.
Correct.
And now, Jeff, a couple more questions. Are there any mushrooms that have been proven to give you better skin, younger looking skin, and make you look younger than your years? We've talked about longevity. We've talked about brain health, but is there anything that gives you the oomph on your skin?
Well, you know what? Yeah, there's a mushroom that's been used quite a bit for that called tremella. And not too many companies are putting it out yet, but I think that's something that you'll see a lot more of out there. Tremella, and in Asia, they've used it not only internally, but they've also used it in topicals, creams, and things like that. So tremella is definitely, you look like whatever it is you've been doing, your skin's pretty good there.
Thank you. I live in the LA sun, but I've been biohacking my skin for a while, making sure I don't look my years yet. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
You have the advantage of living in the Pacific Northwest where there's not that much sun. So the downside is you don't get as much vitamin D, but on the plus side is you don't get a lot of damage either. So I just feel like people in Seattle and Vancouver look younger than their years for some reason.
I think that's a lot because people in this part of the world really like to get outdoors. So they're outside, they're into hiking, camping, all sorts of outdoor activities. So I think they're very active people, and I think that's part of it. And that's where you'd fit in perfectly up here because you like to get out and hike. I mean, beautiful hiking up here in so many different places. So yeah, I think it's just that outdoor lifestyle, and that's why a lot of people move up here. Now in the wintertime, I actually head for the warmer climates. I spend my winters in Argentina, actually.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. I would love to do that. Great job.
It's a diamond down there in Patagonia for 3-4 months every year. And it's just a beautiful area. It's right along the side of the Andes Mountains. There's beautiful lakes and rivers. And I just really enjoy it down there.
That's amazing. Jeff, we're coming up on time. Where can people find you online?
Come to namex.com, NAMMEX.com. We have a lot of information there. So please come. I've got slideshows. We've got different documents that can help you deepen your knowledge about mushrooms and what they are and what they're used for. So definitely come to the website. Lots of information there.
Great. And as you pointed out earlier, I urge the listeners to kind of get into mushrooms, dip their toes in the water, try out a few of them, see which one agrees with them, and then maybe use that as part of a regular regimen. But first, of course, you got to fix your diet, make sure the nutrition's on point before you start adding some of these other enhancers to your lifestyle. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the Anti-Aging Hacks show. I really appreciate you coming on here.
Faraz, thank you. It's been great to talk to you, and I really appreciate you having me on.